I spent my life loving my daughter, teaching her to ride a bike, celebrating every little victory, and giving her everything I had. But as she grew, our closeness faded. When she announced her wedding, I poured $500,000 into making it perfect, only to discover a stranger standing beside her, called Dad. The man who replaced me had barely known her, yet I was invisible. My heart broke, but when I finally withdrew my support, the shock on her face made me realize something powerful. Love doesn't survive where it's unwelcome. And in that moment, I felt free. I remember the day my daughter was born like it was yesterday, the tiny fingers wrapped around mine, the soft cooing that filled the room, and the instant bond that made me feel like I would do anything to protect her. From that moment on, her happiness became my purpose. I celebrated every scraped knee, every school project, every small victory as if it were my own. I taught her to ride a bike, walked her to school when she was nervous, and stayed up late helping with homework she didn't understand. I watched her first performance, cheered at her first sports game, and wiped her tears when the world seemed too harsh. Every laugh, every hug, every "I love you, Dad" felt like a reward, a reminder that I had earned my place in her heart. But as she grew older, something began to change. The trust in her eyes started to fade, replaced by a polite smile or a distant gaze. She stopped calling me Dad and began calling me by my name. I told myself it was just a phase, that teenagers naturally drift away, but deep down I felt the first sting of being replaced in her life. I held on, hoping that one day we would find our closeness again, thinking that love like ours could survive anything. Then the day came that changed everything. She told me she was getting married. My heart leaped with hope. I pictured myself helping her pick the flowers, choosing the perfect dress, maybe even walking her down the aisle. I imagined that this would be the moment we found each other again, that we could reconnect and laugh, cry, and celebrate together. I poured my heart into this wedding. I spent every penny I had, $500,000, on the venue, the dress, the decorations, the flowers, everything. I wanted it to be perfect, a reflection of my love, a gift that would remind her how much I cared. But when the rehearsal began, my heart sank. I watched as she introduced a man I had never seen before, standing proudly beside her, holding her hand. "This is my father," she said, "father." The word hit me like a physical blow. The man, kind, polished, everything I wasn't, had stepped into my place. He had only been in her life for a few years, yet somehow he had replaced me completely, and she didn't seem to mind at all. I wanted to ask why, to tell her that I had been there for her every single day of her life, but the words wouldn't come. My chest tightened with a grief I couldn't name. It wasn't anger. It wasn't jealousy. It was the hollow ache of being erased from someone you would give your life for. She whispered, almost apologetically, "Please don't make this awkward. People already think he raised me. It's just easier if you play along." Play along? Pretend I had never existed? My heart shattered into pieces. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake her, but all I could do was sit quietly, the reality settling in like ice in my chest. I realized then that no matter what I had done, no matter how much I had given, the bond I thought was unbreakable had been replaced. And yet I still showed up on her wedding day. That's what fathers do. I sat at the back, invisible, watching the man she called Dad walk her down the aisle. I watched guests cheer, toast, and smile at him, while my sacrifices, my love, my years of devotion went unnoticed. My chest ached with a pain that had no name. Yet beneath it all, a tiny voice whispered, "You are still here. You are still alive. You are still you." And in that whisper, I felt the first seed of something new, something that would change everything. But what happened next would change the rest of my life forever. But what happened next would change the rest of my life forever. When I walked out of that rehearsal, my mind was a storm. Every step felt heavy, almost painful, as if the ground itself was reminding me of everything I had invested. My time, my love, my savings, my whole life. I sat alone in my car afterward, staring at the steering wheel with trembling hands. How had everything changed so quickly? How had I gone from being her whole world to being someone she introduced as an inconvenience? I kept replaying her words in my head. It's easier if you play along. Easier for who? For her? For strangers? For that man she called father? I had been there for every birthday, every scraped knee, every heartbreak. I was the one who stayed awake when she had fevers, who worked extra hours to buy her school supplies, who taught her to drive while she laughed. nervously, and grabbed the steering wheel too tight. I didn't just raise her. I built my identity around being her father. And in one sentence, she erased all of it. Still, even with my heart breaking, I tried to convince myself there must be a reason. Maybe she felt pressure. Maybe someone influenced her. Maybe she was confused. Parents always find excuses to soften their children's mistakes. And I was no different. So instead of confronting her, I quietly tried to understand. I went home and sat in the dark, staring at old photographs, her 5th birthday when she smeared cake on my face, her first day of school when she clung to my shirt, her graduation where she cried in my arms. Was all of that forgotten? Did those memories matter only to me? The next morning, I received a call from the wedding planner reminding me about final payments. Hearing that cold, professional voice made reality feel sharper, harsher. I was spending my life savings on a day where I wasn't even welcomed as a father. But I still went. I still signed checks. I still told myself, you're doing this because you love her. A father's heart is stubborn like that. It breaks but keeps giving. On the wedding day, I showed up early. The venue looked like a dream. Glass chandeliers, white roses everywhere, soft music filling the air. People walked past me without a second glance, assuming I was just another guest. My daughter didn't even come say hello. She walked past me twice, busy laughing with bridesmaids and taking photos with the man she called Dad. And every time I saw her hand on his arm, something inside me twisted. I kept reminding myself, this day is about her, not you. Let her be happy. But happiness shouldn't require erasing someone who loved you. When the ceremony started, I found my seat at the back. The lights dimmed. The music changed. Everyone stood up, everyone except me. I watched her walk down the aisle with him. Her smile bright, her eyes forward, not even glancing in my direction. People clapped and whispered about how proud her father must be. I swallowed the pain and told myself to endure it. But during the speeches, everything changed. The groom raised his glass and thanked the incredible father who raised this wonderful woman. The entire hall turned to look at the man next to her. People cheered, applauded, clapped. And I, the man who paid for all of it, sat in silence. My heart didn't break in that moment. It shattered. I realized then that this was not an accident or misunderstanding. I wasn't forgotten. I was replaced. And I couldn't allow myself to be treated like a ghost any longer. When the coordinator approached me with the final documents for payment, something inside me finally woke up. I stood. The room fell silent. Dozens of eyes turned toward me. I took a deep breath and said, if he is the father today, he can handle the responsibility that comes with it. I placed the unsigned papers on the table. Gasps filled the room. My daughter froze, her face draining of color. Why are you doing this? She whispered, suddenly trembling. For the first time in years, she looked at me, not through me. I leaned close and replied softly, I'm only stepping out of a place you already gave to someone else. Then, without anger, without shouting, without looking back, I walked away. Behind me, the hall erupted into chaos, voices rising, vendors panicking, arguments beginning. But I felt calm, steady, almost weightless. Because for the first time in a long time, I chose myself. And I didn't know it then, but the real storm hadn't even started yet. Because the real storm hadn't even started yet. I thought the worst pain was being replaced. Until I heard the truth that shattered everything I believed about my own daughter. I sat alone in my room that night, staring at the empty space on my wall where her childhood photos used to hang. I had taken them down earlier, not because I didn't love her anymore, but because every smiling picture felt like a reminder of how deeply I had failed. For years I believed we shared an unbreakable bond, a closeness that no one could ever take from us. But the events of the past few days kept replaying in my mind like a nightmare. I couldn't escape. The man she introduced as Dad, the way she smiled at him, the warmth in her voice when she talked to him, those things felt like tiny knives sliding into my chest. Yet the real pain came from her own words, spoken so casually, as if they held no weight. She said I was overreacting, that I should be mature and accept her new bond with him, as if 30 years of raising her meant nothing. I tried to sleep, but the silence in the house felt heavier than ever. Every room reminded me of her childhood, her drawings on the fridge, the old stuffed bear on the couch, the small scratch on the hallway wall from when she rode her toy car too fast. I loved every piece of those memories. To her, they were forgotten. In the morning, I went downstairs and found my sister waiting for me. She had been present during yesterday's argument, and she looked troubled. She asked if we could talk alone. We sat in the living room, and she held my hand gently, something she rarely did unless the situation was serious. Then she told me something that made my heart stop. She said my daughter had been influenced for months, not by love, not by a real fatherly bond, but by lies whispered by my ex-wife and her new husband. They had been feeding her stories about how I never cared, how I never sacrificed, how I only gave money but no love, lies, pure lies. My sister said she overheard them during a family gathering when they thought no one was listening. They wanted her loyalty. They wanted her money, and they wanted me out of the picture. My hands started shaking as she spoke. To think that after all these years, after all the nights, I stayed awake when she was sick, after all the school fees, after all the dreams I supported, someone could rewrite my entire role as a father with a few poisonous words. I felt anger rise in my throat, mixed with sorrow so deep it was almost unbearable. But the worst part was realizing my daughter believed them. She believed strangers over the man who raised her. I felt foolish. I felt used. I felt empty. My sister told me she saw my daughter cry the night before, not because she regretted hurting me, but because she feared losing the $500,000 wedding support. That cut deeper than anything else. For a moment I wondered where I went wrong. Maybe I spoiled her too much. Maybe I made things too easy. Maybe I never taught her the difference between love and convenience. I walked into my backyard, the only place where I could breathe. I stood under the old tree where she once played swing with me, the rope still tied but worn with age. And then it hit me. I needed to stop waiting for her to value me. I needed to value myself first. I couldn't keep breaking myself to keep a place in someone's life who didn't care if I stayed. I decided I would no longer fight for her attention, her validation, or her loyalty. If she wanted to replace me, she could live with the cost of that choice. But deep in my heart, I still prayed she would wake up one day and realize what she had lost before. It was too late. I wiped my tears, took a deep breath, and walked inside with a new kind of strength. Not anger, not revenge, but acceptance. A painful, quiet acceptance. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, what happened next pushed the story into a place I never imagined. And it changed the wedding forever. I was ready to step back quietly, until I discovered something at the wedding venue that turned my hurt into fire. The next morning I decided to visit the wedding venue one last time before finalizing my decision about the financial support. I told myself I was going just to check the arrangements, but deep down, I think I went hoping to feel even a little bit needed again. Maybe someone would ask my opinion. Maybe someone would notice I was there. Maybe my daughter would look at me the way she used to when she was small, like I was her whole world. But when I arrived, the place was full of people rushing around, setting up decorations, checking flowers, moving equipment. Yet no one paid attention to me. I felt like a guest at my own daughter's wedding planning. The wedding planner, who had always greeted me warmly before, looked uncomfortable as soon as she saw me. She forced a small smile and avoided eye contact. My instincts told me something was wrong. I walked around silently, watching workers hang lights and place beautiful white roses along the aisle. The venue looked like a dream, a place where a father should feel proud and emotional, but all I felt was a hollow ache. Then I overheard something that froze me in place. 2 staff members were whispering behind a pillar, unaware that I could hear them. One said her stepdad approved all this yesterday. He said the real father isn't involved anymore. The other replied, "Yeah, he told us the money is coming from him. Big spender, apparently." For a moment I couldn't breathe. I stepped back, gripping the railing as if the world had tilted beneath me. He was taking credit for my years of saving, my sacrifices, my hard work. He was calling himself the real father. My blood boiled. I felt anger rising in my chest like a storm. I tried to calm myself, but when I went to the central hall, I saw something that broke the last piece of patience inside me. On the giant banner listing the contributors and sponsors of the wedding, my name had been removed completely. In its place, under main sponsor, was the name of the man who replaced me. My daughter's stepfather, the man who had known her for barely a fraction of her life, the man who had poisoned her against me. And my daughter, my little girl, had let him. I walked closer, touching the smooth surface of the banner, hoping it was a mistake. But it wasn't. My daughter saw me at that moment. She approached casually, not with guilt, not with affection, but with irritation. Dad, why are you here? I thought we discussed this. Discussed what? I stared at her blankly. She sighed, looked away, and said, "He's been handling things now. It's easier this way. You were complicating things." Complicating things. Me, her father, the man who paid for everything. I felt something inside me crack. Not loudly, not dramatically, but like a quiet tear in a place that would never heal fully. I asked her calmly why she removed my name. She shrugged and said, "It's not a big deal." Don't make it emotional. Not a big deal? My entire identity as her father had been erased publicly, and she called it not a big deal. Looked around at all the people, preparing for a wedding I no longer felt part of. And the truth hit me hard. I didn't belong here anymore. My presence was unwanted, my role stolen, my love unappreciated. I told her I understood. She seemed relieved, thinking the conversation was over. But what she didn't know was that inside my heart something heavy was shifting. I walked out of the venue slowly, each step feeling like I was leaving behind not just a place, but a lifetime of memories. Outside, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, letting the emotions crash over me. I realized I had two choices: keep allowing myself to be humiliated, or finally stand up and reclaim my dignity. And that was the moment I made a decision that would change everything, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. I picked up my phone, scrolled through my contacts, and called the wedding finance manager. My voice was calm, steady, controlled. "Please freeze all payments immediately. I will come in person to sign the final cancellation documents." And just like that, the world I had built for her began to crumble, but this time by my choice, not hers. But I had no idea that canceling the funds wouldn't be the biggest shock, because what happened next exposed everyone's true colors in a way I never expected. The moment I canceled the funds, I expected anger, but I didn't expect the truth that exploded right after, truth that turned my pain into something far more powerful. When I walked out of the finance office after signing the cancellation papers, I felt strangely calm, like a man who had finally put down a heavy burden he had been carrying for too long. But that peace didn't last long. As soon as I stepped outside, my phone began ringing nonstop. First, it was the wedding planner, then my ex-wife, then her husband, then unknown numbers. I ignored all of them, knowing the news must have reached them within minutes. I sat in my car quietly, watching people pass by, wondering how long it would take before the real storm arrived. It took exactly 20 minutes. My daughter called. I stared at her name on the screen, her name that once made me smile no matter how tired I was. Now it only made my chest feel tight. I answered, and immediately she began shouting, "Dad, what did you do? Are you crazy? Why would you cancel everything?" Her voice wasn't sad. It wasn't broken. It was angry, furious even. Not because she hurt me, not because she realized she had crossed a line. No. She was angry because her perfect wedding was falling apart. I let her talk. I listened quietly as she accused me of being dramatic, of trying to ruin her big day, of being jealous of her stepfather. That last word almost made me laugh, not out of humor, but out of shock. Jealous? Of a man who bought his way into her life with lies? Of someone she barely knew in childhood? When she paused to take a breath, I finally spoke, calm, gentle, honest. I told her I wasn't punishing her. I wasn't trying to ruin anything. I was simply stepping aside because she had already replaced me. She didn't argue. She didn't deny it. She only said, "This is not the time to act like this," which hurt more than any insult she could have thrown. Act like this, as if my feelings were a performance, as if I had no right to feel pain, as if fatherhood was something she could edit when convenient. She hung up on me after saying, "Fix it, now." I didn't fix anything. I sat there for a long time, letting the silence settle around me. Then, surprisingly, something unexpected happened. My phone rang again, but this time it wasn't her. It was her fiancé, a young man I barely knew. I hesitated but answered. His voice was nervous, shaky, almost embarrassed. He said he needed to meet me urgently, and before I could refuse, he told me something that made my heart skip. He said, "Sir, I think you need to know the truth about what they've been planning." My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I asked him to speak openly. What he revealed next made everything suddenly make sense. Every change in my daughter's behavior, every cold moment, every small disrespect, every replaced photo, every lie. He said my ex-wife and her husband had convinced my daughter that she didn't need me, anymore, especially not financially. They told her I would be a problem on the wedding day, that I would embarrass her emotionally, and that I like to control things. But that wasn't the worst part. He whispered the part he was scared to say. They planned to make him walk her down the aisle, even if you didn't agree. My heart stopped. My breath froze. For a second, I felt the world tilt. Walk her down the aisle, the one moment every father dreams of, the one moment that symbolizes a lifetime of love, the one moment I had imagined since the first time I held her tiny hand. And they wanted to erase me even from that. Replace me, remove me, rewrite me. I closed my eyes, fighting back the burning behind them. He told me he didn't agree with their plan, that he thought it was wrong and disrespectful, and that he wanted to warn me because my daughter deserved better than manipulations and toxicity. I thanked him quietly, appreciating the courage it took for him to speak with honesty. After the call ended, I sat in silence again, but this silence was different. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't painful. It was clear, sharp, real. For the first time, I wasn't confused anymore. I finally understood everything, not just what happened, but what I needed to do next. Not for revenge, not out of anger, but for my dignity, for my self-respect, and for the love I had given freely for 30 years, even when it wasn't returned. But before I could take my next step, something happened that none of us expected, an unexpected twist that turned the entire wedding into chaos and revealed who truly cared about me. Just when I thought the worst was over, life threw one more truth at me, one that shattered their lies, shook the entire wedding, and finally exposed who had been pretending all along. I drove home slowly, my mind replaying every word the groom had told me. The truth cut deeper than any knife, but strangely, it didn't break me. Instead, it made everything clear, why my daughter's eyes had grown distant, why she spoke to me like a stranger, why every decision about the wedding felt like it was being made behind my back. I realized now it wasn't just her. It was the influence around her, feeding her stories, shaping her thoughts, painting me as someone I never was. When I reached home, I didn't even turn on the lights. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring into the darkness, thinking about how I had spent years being gentle, forgiving, quiet, even when I was hurt. But silence has a cost, and mine had been heavy. An hour passed before someone knocked on my door. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just another vendor demanding payment or another angry call. But the knocking continued, louder, more urgent. I finally opened the door, and what I saw froze me in place. It was my daughter's childhood best friend, Sarah, the girl who used to spend half her life at our house, the one who always called me uncle with a smile. She stood there, breathless, her eyes wide, her phone still in her hand. "Uncle, you need to come back to the venue." "Right now." My heart tightened. "Why?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "Because everything is falling apart. And she needs you." I didn't move. I didn't speak. A part of me didn't believe her. Another part didn't want to go. But Sarah stepped closer and said something that broke whatever walls I had built in the last few hours. "She's crying. Really crying. Not because of the wedding, but because of what she just found out." I asked her what happened, but Sarah shook her head. "I think she should tell you herself. But please, Uncle, don't leave her alone." I grabbed my keys and we drove in the quiet night. When we reached the venue, I saw chaos everywhere. Decorators were packing things. The manager was arguing with someone. Vendors were demanding payments up front. The place looked like a battlefield after the dust settled. Then I saw her, my daughter, standing in the middle of the mess. Her makeup smudged, her dress wrinkled, her eyes swollen from crying. She looked so small in that big fancy dress. Nothing like the confident woman who had told me to play along. When she saw me, she didn't run. She didn't scream. She just froze, like she wasn't sure I'd actually come. I walked toward her slowly, each step heavy with years of hurt. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, only a trembling breath. Finally, she whispered, "Dad." I didn't know. Her voice cracked on the word Dad, as if saying it hurt, or maybe as if she had forgotten how it felt on her tongue. I kept my voice calm. "Didn't know what?" She wiped her eyes with shaking hands and pointed at her phone. "They lied to me," she whispered. "They told me you never wanted to help, that you only paid because you wanted control, that you would embarrass me, that you didn't care about me like he did." Her voice broke completely then. "But the groom, he told me the truth." She took a step closer, her hands trembling. Dad, is it true? Did you really pay everything just so I could be happy? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her. The girl I raised. The girl who had once hugged me after school every day. The girl who used to believe I could fix anything. Yes, I finally said softly. I did it because I love you. Not for control. Not for pride. Just love. I wasn't expecting her to fall into my arms, but she did. She broke down completely, holding me like she had been holding her breath for years. Her voice shook against my shoulder as she said, I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were manipulating me. I thought you didn't care anymore. I closed my eyes because the pain in her voice was too real, too raw. When she pulled back, her eyes were red but determined. I want him to walk me down the aisle, she said. My chest tightened. Who? She swallowed. You. Only you. For a moment, everything inside me softened. But then reality returned. The chaos, the unpaid vendors, the hurt, the betrayal, the broken trust. We can fix the wedding tomorrow, she whispered. Please, don't leave me tonight. And for the first time in years, I saw my daughter, not the adult influenced by lies, not the distant voice on the phone, but my little girl who used to hold my hand. But just when I thought things were finally healing, a voice from behind us shattered. The moment, and one final. Betrayal turned the night into a war, just as my daughter reached for my hand, thinking the nightmare was ending. A single voice behind us sliced through the moment and exposed the final betrayal that none of us saw coming. Before I could say another word to my daughter, a sharp, angry voice echoed from behind us. What are you doing? We both turned, and there he was, the man she had introduced earlier as her father, his face twisted with frustration, his eyes full of panic. He wasn't worried about her tears or the ruined wedding. No, he was worried about losing the control he had gained, the respect he enjoyed, the position he had stolen. My daughter stepped behind me slightly, like she was suddenly unsure of everything she once believed. He marched toward us, pointing at me like I was the enemy. You're manipulating her, he snapped. You're confusing her when she's already emotional. I didn't react. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stood still. My silence made him angrier. She made her choice, he barked. She wanted me to walk her down the aisle. She trusts me. My daughter's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time, they weren't tears of confusion, they were tears of realization. She straightened her back and answered him softly but firmly. No, that wasn't my choice. That was the choice you and Mom pushed on me. The man froze. He wasn't expecting that. His mouth opened and closed, like he was searching for the right words to pull her back under his influence. Then he pointed at her phone. He's lying to you. That man, he jabbed his finger toward me. We didn't pay for everything. You think he did, but you don't know the full story. He's trying to make you feel guilty. He wants attention. He always has. But by now my daughter wasn't afraid. She wasn't confused. She wiped her tears and lifted her chin. No, Mom told me he didn't help. You told me he didn't care. But the receipts, the coordinator, the groom, they all say the same thing. Dad paid for everything. His face shifted instantly. Shock. Then irritation, then something darker. Those receipts can be forged, he muttered. People lie. Coordinators lie. Vendors lie. He jabbed a finger at me again. He lies. And that's when my daughter snapped. For the first time in her life, she raised her voice at him. Stop lying to me! Everyone in the hall turned. The decorators paused. The caterers looked up. Even the vendors arguing near the entrance fell silent. She walked forward until she was standing right in front of him. You told me he abandoned us, she said, her voice trembling but steady. You told me he didn't care about me. You told me he stopped being a father, but everything you said, everything, was a lie. He took a step back. She took a step forward. You made me believe I was unwanted, she continued. You made me think my own father didn't love me. You took advantage of the fact that I was hurting and confused. Her voice cracked. Why? Why would you do that to me? He looked around like he wished he could disappear. His confidence had drained completely. His shoulders dropped. But then he said something that exposed everything. Because he was in the way. The words fell out of his mouth before he could stop them. My daughter froze. I felt my heart sink. In the way of what? She whispered. He hesitated. Too late. Everyone was listening now. In the way of your mother's marriage. In the way of the image we were trying to build. People respected us more when they thought I raised you, There. It was the truth he had been hiding for years. A truth my daughter needed to hear, but one that shattered her from the inside. She took a step back, shaking her head. So you replaced him? To make yourself look better? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence spoke louder than any lie ever could. My daughter covered her mouth, trying not to break down again. I wanted to hold her, but I stayed still. This was her truth to process. Then she whispered, voice breaking, "You stole my father from me." The man's mask finally cracked. He had nothing left to say, and that's when something unexpected happened. People in the venue began to move away from him. Even the staff looked at him with disappointment. His illusion of being the perfect father was gone. My daughter turned to me slowly, unsure, broken, but clearer than she had been in years. "Dad," she whispered, "can we leave this place? Please?" I nodded and she slipped her hand into mine. We started walking out of the venue together. Every step she took felt like she was walking away from years of manipulation, lies, and confusion. But as we reached the door, someone else stepped inside and brought a new storm with them. Because standing in the entrance, face furious and eyes blazing, was the moment her mother stormed in. The entire room froze, because the truth we thought had ended was only the beginning, and her anger held secrets darker than anything we had uncovered so far. Her mother walked into the hall with the kind of fury that makes everyone silently step back. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she scanned the room. Her face twisted with a mix of shock, embarrassment, and rage. Her eyes darted from the crying vendors to the pale stepfather, to the stunned guests, then finally landed on us. My daughter instinctively tightened her grip on my hand, and I could feel her trembling. Her mother pointed angrily at me. "What did you do?" she snapped, walking toward us with fast, stiff steps. "Why is everyone saying the payment stopped? Why is the wedding falling apart?" My daughter stepped forward before I could speak. "Mom, stop," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Everything's falling apart." Because the truth finally came out, her mother's eyes narrowed. "What truth?" My daughter swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "That you lied to me for years." A visible shock passed over her mother's face, but she hid it behind a forced, sarcastic laugh. "Lie? About what?" My daughter's lip trembled. "About Dad, about everything." Her mother froze. Absolutely froze. Even the stepfather shifted uncomfortably. My daughter continued, her voice gaining strength with every word. "You made me believe he didn't care about me. You made me think he abandoned us. You told me he didn't want to be a father anymore." Her mother's jaw tightened. "I told you what you needed to hear." "No," my daughter whispered. "You told me what made your life easier." The stepfather tried to speak, but her mother held up a hand, silencing him. She took a step closer to my daughter. "Listen to me." "No," my daughter said again, louder. "For once, you listen." The hall grew silent as my daughter's voice echoed through it. Trembling but brave. "Dad paid for everything, not you. Not him." She glanced briefly at the stepfather. "Dad did, and you let a lie replace him." Her mother's mask slipped for just a moment. Fear peeked through her eyes. Fear of losing control. Fear of the truth breaking her perfect image. "He might have paid," she said coldly. "But money doesn't make someone a real father. Then, why did you use his money?" My daughter shot back without hesitation. The word stunned even me. Her mother's face twisted in frustration. "Because you wanted a big wedding." "No," my daughter whispered, tears spilling again. "I wanted a family. The truth. And people who loved me." Her mother looked like she'd been slapped. The room was so quiet we could hear the soft rustle of the wedding gown brushing against the floor. Then my daughter turned to her stepfather, her voice breaking. "How could you pretend to be my father? Why did you let me believe lies?" He shifted awkwardly and finally spoke. "Your mother said it would be easier for all of us. You were young, confused. We just wanted a fresh start." "Fresh start doesn't mean erasing someone," she whispered painfully. He lowered his eyes. My daughter turned back to her mother. "You took my father away from me." Her mother's eyes filled, not with sadness, but with a cold defensiveness. "You don't understand what your father put us through." I finally spoke, my voice calm. "Tell her then." Everyone looked at her mother, her lips pressed tightly together. "Tell her what I did," I repeated softly. Her mother looked away. She didn't answer. She couldn't, because there was nothing to say. There was no crime, no betrayal, No abandonment, only pride, bitterness, and resentment. My daughter's voice cracked. All those years, you watched me suffer. You watched me cry. You watched me think my father didn't love me. And you still stayed silent. Her mother's expression hardened, cold, defensive, trapped. I did what I had to do, she insisted. You wouldn't understand unless you were a mother. Then I hope, my daughter said through trembling breaths, that someday when I'm a mother, I never do to my child what you did to me. Her mother's face crumbled for the first time. The stepfather stepped forward. We should go outside and talk, he murmured, trying to calm her. But my daughter shook her head. There's nothing left to talk about. She stepped closer to me and whispered, Dad, can we please leave? I nodded. I placed my hand gently on her back, guiding her toward the exit. Guests parted silently as we walked. Some bowed their heads. Others wiped tears. A few looked at her mother with disappointment. Everything was over. The wedding, the lies, the illusion. But just as we stepped out of the hall, her mother shouted desperately behind us, If you walk out with him, don't expect to come home. My daughter stopped, slowly turned, and without crying, without shaking, she said a single sentence that ended everything. I'm not losing a home. I'm choosing the right one. I walked away from the wedding chaos with a heavy heart, but something inside me also felt strangely calm, as if a storm had finally passed, and the air had become clear for the first time in years. For so long, I had been running after people who only remembered me when they needed money, support, or solutions, but never love. That night, when I returned home alone, the silence felt different, peaceful instead of empty. I sat on the sofa, stared at the framed photo of little Emily holding my finger when she was barely 3, and I felt a wave of emotions rise inside me. Not anger, not regret, just a deep sadness mixed with acceptance. I realized that the child I raised with so much love wasn't the same grown woman. Standing on that wedding stage, life had shaped her into someone who valued status over loyalty, appearances over relationships, and convenience over truth. I understood at last that I wasn't losing my daughter. I had simply been holding on to the memory of who she used to be. Days passed, and the news of the ruined wedding spread quickly. Some relatives called to gossip. Some called to blame me. A few called to secretly support me, but were too scared to say it openly. I ignored all of them. I didn't owe anyone explanations anymore. I spent my days cooking simple meals, reading, walking in the park, and slowly rebuilding my life brick by brick. But one evening, after nearly a month of silence, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, Emily was standing there, her wedding makeup gone, her hair messy, her eyes swollen from crying. For a moment, she looked like my little girl again, the one who used to run into my arms after school. Dad, she whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just waited. She stepped inside slowly, as if unsure whether she was allowed. Then she burst into tears, loud, broken, painful sobs that echoed through the room. Everything went wrong, she cried. Mom blamed me. People mocked me. And he left me. He said I was too much drama. I stood still, feeling no satisfaction, no revenge, only a heavy ache. Why are you here, Emily? I finally asked. She looked up, eyes pleading. Because I lost everything, and you're the only one who ever stayed. I felt those words hit me hard, but I also knew the truth. She hadn't come because she realized my worth. She had come because she had nowhere else to go. I sat down across from her and spoke carefully, calmly, honestly. Emily, I love you. I always have. But love isn't a door you only knock on when you need shelter. It's something you value even when life is good. She cried harder, saying she was sorry, saying she didn't understand, saying she was confused and pressured and distracted by her mom's influence. I believed some of it, but not all. Then she looked at me and whispered, Dad, can I come back home? A question so simple, and yet so heavy. I breathed deeply, feeling the weight of years pressing on my heart. You can come here, I said gently, but not the same way. Not as someone who uses me and forgets me. If you stay with respect, honesty, and effort, not excuses. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe she would stay. Maybe she would leave again. Maybe she would heal. Maybe she wouldn't. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of any outcome, because I finally understood my worth. I wasn't a backup plan. I wasn't a wallet. I wasn't a placeholder father. I was a man who had loved deeply and unconditionally, and now deserved the same in return. And whether Emily chose to rebuild our bond or let it crumble forever, I had already made peace with the truth. But just when I thought the story had reached its final chapter, fate delivered one more twist I never saw coming. When I opened the door that last night and found her standing there, broken and raw, I felt 1,000 things at once. Relief, sorrow, anger, and a tired kind of hope. She had come back with nothing but the dress on her back and the truth in her hands. That night the city smelled of rain and wet pavement, as if the sky were trying to wash the mess away in sympathy. We didn't speak much at first. She curled on the couch like a child again, the grown woman's posture folding back into the small shape I remembered. The whole house made little sounds. The refrigerator hummed. The radiator ticked. The clock on the mantel counted off seconds like patient footsteps. She cried until she had no more tears left. I sat with her, not offering solutions or lectures, because the truth is, after 30 years of parenting, sometimes what you need most is presence, not words. I made tea. I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. We listened to the soft, steady noise of a city that didn't stop for private disasters. In the days that followed, the fallout from the wedding rolled out like ripples in a pond. The social register piece that had splashed across local feeds brought a storm. Some people sided with me in private messages and awkward phone calls. Others sharpened their tongues in public comments. The Whitmore name got heavy in places it used to be light. The venue management, facing credit demands from vendors, quietly revised their contracts and restructured bookings. Vendors that had expected to invoice the Whitmores reached out to me, since my company had already been in their payment chain for months. My attorney had predicted some of this, but not the social venom. People felt betrayed on both sides, each calling the other villain in their version of the story. Business reacted too. Hayes Property Solutions took a hit in gossip for a week, as tabloids and local news ran the headline that a working-class dad pulled the plug on a society wedding. But then something more interesting happened. A steady trickle of calls came in from people who had been my customers for years, and from new clients who had read the pieces and admired the man who stood for himself. A developer I'd once renovated for called and scheduled a meeting. A small bank invited me to talk about expanding a line of credit for a property. I had eyed. People in my trade, other plumbers, contractors, and building managers, reached out with offers of partnership and referrals. The narrative in some corners shifted from scandal to principled stand. For every gossiping whisper, there was a quiet nod from someone who recognized integrity when they saw it. That taught me an odd lesson. People were watching not only what I'd done at the wedding, but how I handled what came after. Integrity isn't a single act. It's a pattern. Emily stayed for a while. The first week was rough. She came and went like a storm, sometimes present, sometimes slipping away to calls with her mother, who alternately professed innocence and lashed out in thinly disguised anger. She was living through the same confusion I had felt for months, the ache of recognizing you've been manipulated by people you trusted. She came to understand the slow poison of repeated half-truths and the way they can calcify into a new identity if no one intervenes. That week we did small things. We fixed the leaky kitchen faucet together like we used to. She made coffee and burned it twice. We ate sandwiches on the back porch and talked about ridiculous small things because they felt safe. There were hard conversations, too, about the money, about why she'd allowed herself to be convinced, about the years when her mother had shaped her narrative. She cried. I listened. When she asked, "Why didn't you fight harder?" I answered truthfully, "Sometimes. I thought I was doing the right thing by stepping back and letting you choose. I was wrong to be silent when I should have spoken up more clearly. That's on me. Owning my failures didn't make me weak. It made the work of rebuilding possible. We agreed on rules because starting over without boundaries is just a loop that leads back to the same pain. She would live with me for 3 months with no conditions other than trying to be honest, trying to work, and trying to be present in our relationship without grand gestures or entitlement. She found a temp job at a small gallery here in town. Humbling in pay but steady and honest. For the first time in years, she learned to manage a budget, to take care of her laundry, to make appointments and keep them. She asked for help with resumes, with budgeting, with which invoices to prioritize. Those were small bones of trust built back into a system that had almost been broken forever. There were legal matters to settle, vendors asking for clarity, the venue threatening suits, the Whitmore's lawyer making veiled threats. My attorney handled the hard edges, the contracts, the email chains, the signatures, those paper things that people think are just forms, saved us from a lot of rumors. When the venue realized the trail of payments and that I had authorized and sent transfers through my company account, they took steps to rectify the damage with their vendors. My lawyer pushed for mediation rather than public litigation, and the Whitmore family eventually agreed to a quiet settlement that covered the vendors' immediate needs without admitting public fault. The settlement wasn't about money for me. It was about quieting the noise so we could do the harder work of repair. There were also the other kinds of consequences. Emily's marriage unraveled under the strain of public scrutiny and private betrayal. The Whitmores as a family found their social calendar subtly changed. Invitations dried up. People in that circle are quietly cruel. They protect reputation and distance themselves from drama. I felt no joy in the damage to their status. That was never the point. The only public stain that mattered to me was whether my daughter could recover from this and whether I could still be her father. She did slowly. The weeks after the wedding were a mosaic of small recoveries and fresh wounds. One evening she and I sat in the backyard under a thin winter sky, and she asked me the question that burned. Do you hate my mother? It was loaded, full of the unspoken history between adults who had tried to make a life suit them. I answered simply and honestly, no, I don't hate her. I am hurt and disappointed, and there are things I don't understand. I'm angry at what she did to you. But hate is too heavy a place to live. Hate eats you. I want you back, not to punish her. Her eyes were wet, and she took my hand like a lifeline. Reconciliation was neither sudden nor total. Her mother, for her part, called and left messages that swung between apology and accusation. Sometimes she sounded truly sorry. At other times she sounded rigid and defensive, convinced she had done the right thing for the family's future. We tried a conversation with a mediator in the room, less for legal reasons and more to make space for truth. It lasted 2 hours and ended with more fragments than closure. The truth spilled out in pieces, old resentments, financial struggles, bitterness at being overlooked, and a desire to belong somewhere where status mattered. Her mother confessed to steering the narrative in small ways, to exaggerating slights so Emily would distance herself. She didn't call it manipulation. She framed it as survival. Listening to that was bitter. Emily eventually made a decision that surprised some of our friends. She took time away from her mother, not in a dramatic estrangement, but in a protective pause. She told her mother she needed time to process and learn to make decisions without being swayed by the ghost of other people's needs. Her mother protested. People took sides, but the quiet decision gave Emily room to breathe and choose anew. It gave me a chance to be the father I wanted to be, not the absent figure people whispered about, but a man with steady hands and a steady schedule who showed up for the small, ordinary work that being a parent mostly involves. Work gave our lives stability again. I rebuilt my small company with steady effort, helping the community and returning to the values that shaped me. As Emily found routine and responsibility, she finally understood my silence, and we slowly rebuilt trust through talks, arguments, laughter, and mistakes. Over time, she introduced me proudly as her father again, and that healed more than words. The Whitmores faded, the scandal died, and we focused on growth, forgiveness, and truth. Years later, painting a community room together, I realized our wounds had become lessons. Love isn't perfect. It's choosing each other again and again.